Talking Grief podcast. I'm your host, Rainbow Tomes, and in every episode we explore how grief touches our lives at home, at work and beyond. And today's guest is Martin Edwards, CEO of Julia's House. Welcome.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you for coming along. So, what's brought you to the conversation today?
Well, I've been working for a children's hospice, Julia's House, for 20 years. And we have seen and supported many families during that time who've lost a child. And you see how much of an impact it has over how long a time on the whole family. And you also see how other people relate to that grief, either well or badly. And many families tell us about how a lot of people don't know how to deal with them in grief. And I think this is particularly true for families who've lost a child, because that's so unusual. But that phrase, you find out who your friends are, it's sadly very, very true in grief. And a lot of people will say nothing or not visit for fear of saying or doing the wrong thing. And I always say to people, just be there. Just spend time with the person in grief. Don't talk about your own grief. Just spend time with them, meet them where they are, and offer practical help as well. Small acts of kindness can make a real difference. Offering to give them a lift somewhere, making a meal for them, those kind of things. It's the people who stay that those in grief will remember. And they'll remember that they were there for them at their lowest. So don't worry about saying the wrong thing. Just be there.
Gosh, taking that pressure off and focusing on that being present. And I guess, what are your thoughts around workplaces and what can they do differently with this knowledge?
Well, I think if you're grieving, if you're lucky, you've got a very sensitive employer and a great line manager, which is often at least as important as the whole employer, who will be very flexible, very understanding, and who will realise that it's not a predictable time span. If you're unlucky, an employer will expect you to get over it within a certain number of weeks or months, and then just magically be back to normal again. And grief doesn't work like that. You're familiar with the stages of grief, which were first researched and written about by a lady called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And the Kubler-Ross stages of grief, I think, were originally misinterpreted as being a series in succession. You go through this, and then that, and then that, and then the other, and then there's a destination. And I think that was a misinterpretation, because Kubler-Ross pointed out that you can loop back and forth, and we see that a lot. So people talk about triggers in grief: a birthday, an anniversary, a smell that reminds them of their child, a favourite record, or a favourite television programme suddenly coming back on will trigger them. And what they're doing is they're looping back into that stage of more raw grief. You see some people really struggling with the details of their child's illness after the child has died. What if we had spotted this sign sooner? What if we'd been referred quicker? What if that doctor had done this sooner? And a year later, they might be much calmer and more accepting of what has happened. And then a year after that, they might be back there again. So it's not predictable. And an employer needs to recognise that grief will always be there in that person. It's about helping them through it and talking and understanding and trying to be as flexible as possible.
How important do you think meeting other people who have experienced a similar grief is for people?
I think each person is different, and this is the thing about grief. Each person's grief is different, and if a person judges another person's grief according to their own, I think they're misinterpreting or not allowing enough difference.
Yeah.
For some people, it can be very useful to meet other people in grief. For some people, it can draw them back again. So each person has to find their own way, and there's no right or wrong way to grieve. But at Julia's house, the Children's Hospice, we have an annual, we call it a Remembering Day, which we feel is a more positive way of describing a Memorial Day. It's about remembering the child who has been lost and remembering their character and the value that they brought to our world. And as the years go by, you see some families who were bereaved a long time ago, still coming, and others who are very, very newly bereaved. And you do see some quite valuable connections happening there of the ones who are further along, looking to quite naturally support those who are still in that very raw stage of grief. So it can be helpful. And we think it's important for familiar people to help the family. So a hospice isn't just about end-of-life care. A children's hospice particularly is about whole life care from the diagnosis onwards. So if, for example, a child is born with a genetic condition that will end their life, we know the destination, but we don't know how long it will take. It might take 15 years or 20 years. So there is a lot of life to be lived. And our role is to be regular support for them, to give regular respite to the mums and dads by looking after their child. And therefore, they will get to know the nurses and carers very, very well. And after their child has passed away, we will make sure that the nurses and carers who knew them best are the ones who continue to visit them and can continue to give them that support. There is a great value in bereavement counselling, and in almost all cases, a bereavement counsellor won't know the person they met before, that they won't know them in their previous life. But we also think there's value in a familiar face, somebody who you can just talk with or spend silent time with.
And it feels, what you're describing, it would almost be like multiple losses all in one go when you've had those relationships, formed those relationships.
Yes, and for the whole family, so for the brother and sister.
Right.
And I think parents who've lost a child do say to us that their other children, depending on their age, but they will nearly always grieve differently from an adult. One mum described it as puddle jumping in and out of their grief. So when a child approaches a puddle, they'll suddenly jump into it and the water goes everywhere. And then they'll come out of it and it's as if that they weren't in it at all a few moments later. And that's what a child can do with their own grief. They're processing the loss of their sibling in a different way than an adult would. And it can take parents by surprise when that child suddenly jumps into that puddle and the water just goes everywhere.
Yeah. And so how do you support parents with how to cope in those times? Because it's so unpredictable.
Well, our nurses or carers would visit the family at home and just sit with them and be with them. And our sibling workers will take the siblings out after they're bereaved. We form relationships with them while their sibling is still alive, but we continue that support afterwards. And you do often find with statutory services that they're all about the clinical needs of, in our case, the child. And then as soon as that child passes away, everybody leaves.
Steps away.
And that family is left looking at four walls. Even if they had a disability car to transport their child, that car has to be returned within a couple of weeks. There's no period of adjustment, and therefore I think it's really important to, as familiar people supporting the parents and the siblings, that we continue to provide that support. And the siblings go to outings, they go to fun outings during the life of their sibling as well as the one-to-one visits. And they can continue to go to that siblings club after their sibling has died. It would be quite wrong to say, oh, well, you can't come anymore.
Yes.
They still need that friendship and that support.
So it's really, that community is so important, that connection, relationships.
Yes, and a family's closest friends and closest relatives, the people that they would naturally look to turn to. If they remain constant in their lives, I think that's one of the most valuable things.
And what surprised you most about doing this work?
Well, I think you do hear so many families saying, we have lost touch with some of our friends who we thought we were close to.
Yeah.
You hear that time and time again. It shouldn't be the case, should it? But there's almost a sort of double loss there. There's a loss of some friendship and support networks who can't cope with that and decide to distance themselves. I think there's also, if a child is born with a life-limiting condition or becomes diagnosed with one, there's a period of anticipatory grief when the family know that their child is going to pass away, or it's highly likely that they will. And that, as I say, that could last for years or certainly months. And so there is a period of adjusting to that reality long before it happens. So our line of work is very different, for example, than supporting a family in grief if they've lost a child in a car accident, where it's very sudden and there's absolutely no expectation of it. Possibly some of the harder situations we deal with are children with cancer where they go through a long period of potentially curative treatment.
Gosh, yeah.
Which is different from a genetic condition which is inevitably life-shortening. And then after all of those curative options are exhausted, then you're into the palliative phase, and suddenly there's a massive period of very quick adjustment that the family somehow needs to adjust to, and that's incredibly difficult and challenging. And we need to build relationships quickly with families there, because we didn't know those children until they were referred at that palliative stage. Yeah. And some of our nurses are amazing at doing that, at building trust through listening, through asking the families what they need, and just through being there through thick and thin for them.
And it's really interesting that you said about your nurses and the focusing on what do they need. That, as we've sort of been having these conversations through the podcast, that seems to come through more and more, is that pausing and really taking stock on what does someone need, and being open to that can change. Like you said, yes. If we're in a puddle or not.
Yes, and the worst thing you can do is be prescriptive. This is what you should do, or this is what we offer, take it or leave it. That's not the right way to listen to somebody in grief. I think it's about being in congress with them. Yeah. Meeting them where they are physically and mentally, and just listening and understanding to what they need in that moment. And it may be different from one day to the next or 1 week to the next.
And I'm just hearing you talk about all this amazing work that you and your team are doing. What do you do as a kind of organisation, as a team, in terms of coping with providing this support? And again, I guess it's so individual and unique, but are there things that you've found that are more helpful than others?
Yes, it's very important. I think if a member of staff burns out on my watch, it's my responsibility. I need to make sure that we're doing what we can, everything we can, to ensure our staff don't burn out, because they will see it time and time again through the course of their years with us. So we just try to be the most emotionally literate employer we can. We train all our managers in advanced interpersonal skills, including in emotional intelligence. We have debriefs after the death of children to ask the staff how they're feeling. We have a confidential counselling helpline for any member of staff to call at any time, or for their immediate family members to call on their behalf if they're worried about them. And it's just things like that which I think every employer should do, because all of their staff could go through acute stress in their personal lives at any time. But if you're working in a field of palliative care, I think it's especially important to provide those places for people to decompress. And it always worries me if in our case a colleague, as we're talking about now, if they're at their lowest, that's the time when they're least likely to reach out for support. So we try and continually remind people of the support that is there, so that they'll know it. They won't have to research it when they're at their lowest. They'll just know it.
Right, front of mind.
Yes,
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And if you look after your people, they'll stay with you longer, and those staff will know each other better, so they will be able to look out for each other better.
Gosh, you have shared so much helpful and insightful information. I'm just wondering if there was one thing that you want people who are listening to this to take away, what would that be?
Well, I would say to people in grief, it will feel that it's absolutely all-encompassing at times, because it is at those times. But in time, with the right support around you, other parts of your life will grow back and resume a place in your life. The grief doesn't diminish. You never stop grieving for a child you've lost, because you never stop loving that child, and grief is the other side of love. The two go together. So you never stop grieving your child, but you can get to the point where other parts of your life become important again, and eventually grow around that grief and allow you to carry on. And that's what Julia's House and other supportive causes are there to help you with. And to anybody who knows somebody in grief, just be there for them. Spend time with them, listen to them, offer them practical help. And then you can play your part in helping that family to go through the worst and to come out the other side.
Yeah, so thank you so much for coming along and sharing everything that you have today.
You're very welcome, and thank you, Rainbow, for asking me. I think we are better at talking about these things now as a society, but the more we do that, the more we build understanding that will help people.
Absolutely. Thank you. So if this episode has resonated with you, please subscribe to our Talking Grief podcast and share it with anyone that you feel might find it helpful. If you need support or resources on grief in the workplace, visit our website at www.thegrieftherapists.co.uk. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.